I'm Michael Duke. I'm the host of this program, and I'm here to welcome Mitchell Clark. He is the CEO of Leadershipity, a serial entrepreneur, five-star rated international speaker, longtime MLB coordinator, and a three times World Series coach and dream maker. So, Trent, we're just excited to have you on the program and looking forward to our conversation today.
That's awesome, Michael. Thank you for having me. Super excited to talk about high performance always.
Yeah. Well, so looking at your LinkedIn, you have been involved with one of my passions, which is baseball. My kids played baseball. I have two sons. My one of my saddest days, Trent, was when my younger son came to me, 15 years old, and says, "Dad, I think I'm done playing baseball." He couldn't hit the curve. He was really good. He was always starting, always doing good, but he got really frustrated when he couldn't hit the curve. And it's like I was heartbroken because what am I going to do with my summers? When I didn't have baseball to watch.
Yeah.
Tell the listeners, tell me, give us an overview of your career. But I'd love for you to kind of drill down on the baseball side first. How you got into it? Why strength and conditioning? How did that roll into other things? Because I mean, you played the Indians, which I'm a Cleveland boy, so I was born in
Oh, are
Cleveland,
you good?
Ohio.
Nice.
Oh yeah, always rooting for the Indians. But then you did get a World Series ring, right, with the Angels.
I did. I got an Indians ring on today. There's
Yeah,
uh there's
awesome.
there's the that is the
Love the tribe.
1997 World Series right there. Yeah, which I love that one because of that home plate design, right? I thought
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
very
Of
beautiful.
course, that's also a first loser ring because we won the American League Championship and lost the World Series, right? So, well, okay. So to break that down for you, I was born Battle Creek, Michigan kid. Michigan, obviously, it's winter. Baseball is not exactly the high priority, but there was a lot of good baseball going on, and we were also host of the national championship for the AABC, called the Stan Musial World Series. So if you were a good player in my town and you won the local city league, you were the host of the national championship. So
Wow.
it was so players came and they stacked the league because the prize was worth the juice, right? And so I was an asset and a commodity in that league as a young player. And really it started, Michael, with my audit of excellence. I mean, I was a kid, seventh grade. I decided, like, hey, career day. I told my teacher I want to be a pro baseball player. I'm sure he stuck it in a pile, like, hey, pro baseball player, policeman, lawyer, president, whatever we all wanted to be. But I was serious, man. I was the youngest of four. My brother played hockey at Michigan State. My other brother was a Division I tailback, and my sister was Miss Michigan teen. And I was like, man, I'm better than all of them. I'm playing in the majors, and but I really got a juice. I really got a jump right after my freshman year in high school. I had a camp that was run by a former major leaguer, and he said, like, you had to get a ticket. You had to be invited to his camp. Like, it was like the showcase before there were showcases, right? And it was the who's who, and so it was about 8 counties wide. And man, I sat by my mailbox every day waiting for my Willy Wonka golden ticket for an invite to this guy's camp. And I got it, and I had about 6 weeks. And I remember reading the ticket, man. It was like, hey, this is what it's going to be. This is what you got to come ready for. Da da da. And then there's little asterisks in bold at the bottom, like, if you are the MVP, you get to sit down with camp director, blah blah blah, former major leaguer, right? And I was like, oh man. So I went to work, right? I mean, I'm working, lifting, training, hitting, doing everything. And like all good things, right? Preparation meets opportunity. I had the week of my life, and I was, the MVP of the week at this camp, and it was just playing out of my mind. And man, I got to sit down with a guy, right? And I was nervous, but I felt emboldened, right? Good week. And I asked him straight out. He said, what do you want to do, Trent? I said, I want to do what you did. I want to play in the majors. And he said, yeah, I've seen you, man, and I think you can do it. And I was like, oh, I mean, Michael, my shoulders must have dropped 3 inches that day, right? Because I was just, uptight. Then I got I really put on my boldness shoes at this next question, and probably just dumb teenage kid, right? But like, I had to know. I had one chance with this guy, and I just said, "Hey, listen, with all due respect, everybody's telling me no. Man, they're telling me I'm not big enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not fast enough." And of course, in my mind, the only thing that's going through me is I'm not enough, right? And he said, "Oh, that's interesting, Trent." He goes, let me ask you a question." And I was like, "Sure." And he said, "Hey, of all those people telling you no, any of them play in the majors?" And I was like, "No, no, my mom didn't. My PE teacher didn't. Like my freshman coach didn't. Like my summer ball coach didn't." And he's like, "Let me give you a little piece of advice." Said, "You know, if you want something in this life, I suggest that you strongly go out and find people that have done it before you ask. Otherwise, I don't know if their opinions are going to be validated." And I was like, "Yes, sir." And man, that lesson, that was my first
Hmm.
mentoring lesson, right? I mean, I've taken that through everything I've ever done, every business ever owned. I've started 12, right? I mean, and I take that advice from the word go. But so from there on, man, it was just right. I was on my way. I was seeking people. My high school, 3 state championships, sophomore, junior, senior year. Then went on to 2 junior college national championships, actually in tennis. So I was playing both baseball and tennis.
What was your position?
I was a center
Position.
fielder, leadoff guy. Yep.
All
And
right.
well, I hit two as an amateur, um, and then when I went to that higher level, Division 1, all that, I was a leadoff guy. And so, runs scored, on base percentage. I missed the Moneyball era, man. I was 5 years ahead of Moneyball, and that's what I really needed. I really needed those Oakland A's to go, "Hey, man, all this guy does is production," because that would have made me a much higher draft choice and a much more prospect. I didn't even get drafted, so um, so from that, I mean, it really started these next 5 years of just excellence, excellence. How do we win championships? How do we do this? And then even at the Division 1, you're trying to play at the highest levels. And I am 5'6", and I competed at about 173 pounds, which is pretty big. I was pretty strong, but I had to work, man. I mean, I just had to work to keep up with people because I didn't look like everybody else, right? And so especially at that highest level. So I really just found that that was going to be my calling card for building championship caliber, was the work, the effort, working smarter, not harder. And I worked really hard. And I look back after, a labrum tear and everything else, that I didn't work very smart because I wasn't asking the right questions. I didn't know people that could always direct me in the right way. And so some of the hard work was actually counterproductive in the end. But, I don't think I'd change that. I don't regret that. But
So
at the
take
end
me
of the
from
day, that's
Division
really
One to the bigs. How'd you go from D1 to the bigs?
so. Yeah. So from D1 to the bigs, I turned down a chance to play after like junior college. I turned down an offer to sign as a free agent. And then, so I went and signed at Toledo and played both tennis and baseball there. And so I was at the University of Toledo in the Mid America Conference. Had a decent run, and I went undrafted. So I was kicking around independents and things like that. And a scout just came and goes, "Hey, man, I don't think it's in your cards for you. I think you make a great coach, and there's a couple opportunities." And I was like, so that was a job transition that was going on there because my shoulder was pretty bad, and I wasn't able to throw like I could in high school anymore. And that was probably because of the tennis and serving and everything else, that I was just going through so much on my rotator. And again, hard training that wasn't very wise on that rotator. And so they said, "Hey, you make a great coach." And I applied, and Sparky Anderson hired me. And I went to work for Detroit. I never played in the majors. I went right to coaching at like 24 years old, probably. And yeah, 20, 23, 24, I signed with Detroit. And then we had the strike. And so I signed with Coach Nick Saban at Michigan State, and went to Michigan State to coach. And I knew Coach Saban from when he coached at Toledo, and he knew who I was. More importantly, he knew me. And so then I started coaching, and went back to professional baseball back in '95 after the strike ended, and signed with Cleveland. We went to the World Series that year, '97, and then signed with the Angels. Spent another 7 years out there with Terry Collins and Mike Scioscia and a bunch of great staff with, man, Buddy Black. And we had a lot of guys. We had a lot of good, tons of people, right? And so it was awesome. Joe, of course, with the Cubs, right? Joe won the championship there in Tampa, and so now he's back with the Angels. But yeah, just great people to be around. I just learned so much about coaching from some great coaches. So that really served me to kind of get there. So while never playing in the major leagues, I coached there and signed in the major leagues first when I was 25 years old as a coach.
So was it always in strength and conditioning? Is that where you
Always.
stayed the whole time?
Always, yep.
So
Always training up athletes and preparing. So even when you talk about high performance, man, I mean, that was the whole thing. Like you have the elite of the elite. You have the 1% of the 1% that are all coming in to compete for these jobs. And it's fractional, the difference between the major league level and everybody else, right? And all these leagues are just like that. And when you see someone, the layman sees a AAA player or a high level hockey player in the minor leagues, like you think they're as good as Sidney Crosby or as good as the best major leaguer when you see him in person, but they have flaws that predicate their ability to compete at that top level. And it's so fractional, Michael. It's amazing.
so the you were in the bigs, what, 15 years, 10, 15 years?
So I was there from 90, yeah, so 93, 94. Yeah, so like 12 years
12
through
years.
2005.
So share with me in that period of time, when you're looking at the talent, when you're looking at these players, uh, what what separated the good from the great? What were the main obstacles that those players were faced with to become great?
Mm. So there's a ton of obstacles, right? There is temptation galore. There is all sorts of different people surrounding you that give you bad information, right? That don't know, and they just want to be around pro athletes and tell them that they do know, and they want a part of that activity. So advisors, and by the way, this actually mirrors business, right? You have good advisors around you. Get the best people on your team, right? Like all those things are saying. Have people that are actually caring about you genuinely, even though it may not always look like it, right? There's a lot of coaches that are really hard on people, right? And hey, it's just tough love for me. It is a form of love. It is a form of what they want best for you. But I see people just cave under hard stress and pressure to reach your maximum performance. And they're like, oh yeah, they just made it so hard for me. But they're preparing for what's about to happen at that next level. They're preparing you for the disadvantages, for the obstacles that are going to happen. Because if you don't have resolve, like you basically eliminate yourself in that high performance level. If there's no resolution and no ability to work through hard challenges. And that's my show, right? Winners find a way. And I love that quote. Winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win. Like I love that from the four disciplines of execution. But the reality is that there's so many people who don't. They just like, oh my gosh, we're losing. Oh, what am I gonna do? Well, I'm gonna blame Michael because it's his fault, or I'm gonna make excuses, or I'm gonna just quit. It's getting too hard, or I'm just gonna ignore the data and just keep doing what I'm doing and lose, 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 lose until you've lost it all. And so those four key elements really just rear its head. And I would say the one separator, Michael, at that top level, same in sports and business, is self-discipline. The
Hmm.
people who have the ability to be grounded and be like, hey, this is what I'm working on. I can prioritize my tasks, my massive, my where I get maximized impact to and contribute to my team, and how I do that really well. Know my superpowers, know my areas that aren't so great. The one thing that you'll see in both great businesses and great professional athletes is they have some super skills that supersede everybody else. And instead of trying to build up a bunch of weaknesses that they have, they surround themselves with people that are strong in areas that they are weak, and then they take their superpower and they do what I call the shampoo treatment, which is wash, rinse, and repeat, right? Like they do it. And Michael, I am going to do it in this game as a hitter until you, as the pitcher, can stop me. And until you can stop me, I have no reason to change, right? Like, and the best in the world really exploit their strengths and dominate other people with it, and they do it unapologetically. Like
Hmm.
they can do it humbly, like with confidence. You can do it. You do not have to be an egomaniac. You do not have to be a jerk, but they will do it unapologetically because it is absolutely the way they contribute to their team, create value, and maximize impact.
So think about your years in the bigs. What player comes to mind that through commitment to self-discipline optimized their talent, that just kind of was the embodiment of that particular value. Is there anybody come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of them that come to mind like right away. Like, and I like that mentality of, whatever it takes, right? And Darren Erstad was a guy like that with the Angels. We had a couple of them that were really strong in that way. Scott Spezio was a guy who wasn't this, frontline high name, but he still remains as the top playoff player of all time. And the reason is because his focus and intent was always so strong. His father's a former major leaguer. He learned it from a very young age about how to practice, how to prioritize, intent, what he can do, what he doesn't do. And he just bolstered up all sorts of strengths and removed a bunch of his weaknesses to even make his weaknesses up to average. So he became this utility player that I think's played every position in the major leagues except two.
Is that right?
Um,
Wow.
yeah, and so I mean, how many guys can say that, right? Like you played 7 positions on the field. We're pigeonholed at that level to the one thing that we do really well. So you saw that. The other thing, you see like David Eckstein, right? A 5'7", 160-pound shortstop in the major leagues, unheard of. But here's a guy who is the epitome of the grit formula, right? Where we have the grit formula where we have talent times effort equals skill, right? And so we have this talent. Well, he played at the University of Florida. He's not an untalented guy, but at that level, his skill is probably like a 6 when he comes in and drafted, but his effort's a 10. And so, man, he's a 60, 10 times 6, right? Then we take that 60 times 6, like, whoa, that's all right. Like 600, people can live with that 60 times 10. So, when I look at those grid formulas, I want executives that are 500 or better.
Yeah.
And if we have people under 200, like don't even hire them in your organization. You're going to like beat yourself up. But when you take like a Brady or a David Eckstein type guy, what they do is they both came in the league at not high like skill talent
Brady
level,
was seventh
right?
round. Yeah,
Yeah,
seventh
yeah.
round.
Like this guy's like he's still notorious for the worst vertical and the worst 40 of all time. He's the GOAT, right? Like so, this is what they're measuring, which may not be the right measure, but he still owns that, right? And so he comes in. They go, hey, he played at Michigan. He's no slouch, but hey, the 6, hey, in 1 year it's a 7, right? Because he's studying, he's working, da da da. And then 2 or 3 years, now he's an 8 talent. Right. And then it's 10 effort. Every rep counts. Every rep counts. And they keep going at it, going. Hey, it feels like a 9. And then all of a sudden you watch him now, like, guy can't run, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know, man. The guy hits, throws a ball on a dime, calls, audibles anytime he wants to call the right thing. It's almost 10 and 10, right? And we see these players like Jordan and Brady and they just have figured that out, but they didn't all start with 10 talent. And that's actually a danger zone because that's probably one of the most frustrating athletes I've ever coached, Michael, when you talk about high performance is the great talent 9 and the 3 effort, right? Because,
Yeah.
you got the 9 talent, the 3 effort, that's a 27 times 3. I'm not even at a 100, right? On a scale to 1,000, I can't even get this person at a 100. And I mean, you're going to pull your hair out trying to develop players like this because what I've noticed is it's rare that effort changes. Effort will change, but it's usually a catastrophic event, right? Like someone passes, a near-death experience, something significantly changed, like you get fired or something like that. There's been a lot of athletes who have recreated themselves after getting fired, and they've changed their effort level because of that. But it's not often that I see effort change. So that's probably the most frustrating person when you talk about high performance that team leaders have to deal with. And we all do. We all have that. We all have people on our team who are like, oh my gosh, look at over here. Like Trisha can sell rice to China. I mean, she's the best salesperson we have. But then doesn't share the values, doesn't give the effort, doesn't, do all these things. So, hey, kills her minimum sales every year and her quota by double, could probably quadruple it if she actually really got her head down and put the effort. This is fictional, of course.
Yeah,
So,
I get it.
but
Well, let's switch
we
gears
have
for a
that.
second. Let's switch gears for a second. The reason why this conversation is so interesting to me is for 20 years, I've been teaching business leaders that if they take the mindset of a coach, a sports coach,
Yes.
and apply it to business, that they'd be more effective.
That's
So
right.
without saying much more than that right now, we end up probably sharing some details as the conversation continues. But share with me from your unique perspective, the head coach, who, in your opinion, was a coach that got the most out of his players? What was it about their leadership style that allowed that to happen? And then kind of end with kind of what was your leadership style? How did you, um, if you were to give a brief formula for how you got the most out of your players, how would you describe that? So I'd love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah, so really, really good question. So I think Michael, you hit something really important, which is no one went to school for coaching, and no one went to school for leadership. That's in business, right? So when you talk about business, that's a real challenge because those are two things that we really need. This is why leadershipity exists, right? We want all these idiots of leadership, accountability, dependability, responsibility, integrity. I mean, we want all those things all the time, but we have most of them, but sometimes we don't have them. And so when you talk about coaches that really develop talent, like Mike Socha was very good at it. Nick Saban was very good at it, and very different styles, those two, right? Nick Saban has a
Compare and
process.
contrast. How are they different? Yeah, help us
Yeah, so
understand.
Nick Saban has a process, right? Like, so he and Belichick are very close. Like they believe, like, hey, they are very kind of controlling to what your role is, and they just have teams of leaders that they expect. Now, what they do very well, both of those guys, is that they empower their unit of staff, their coaching unit. Like, Nick's not going to dive in and start coaching up the offensive line. He's not going to do it. He has an offensive line coach that he fully believes in, knows a ton more about than he does about being an offensive lineman because the guy was one, right? He's been in the trenches for a long time and he knows exactly how to get the best out of his players. But both he and his coach have agreed this is what we need from our players. And now he gives the autonomy of that coach to allow him to get those players up to that level. When he falls short, Nick is going to hold him accountable to that. I think that is probably why he's so successful, right? He is a 1 minute manager. He is absolutely process driven. He has no inefficiencies in his game at all. He knows exactly what he needs from players. He knows exactly what he needs from them. And I think that's one of the things Belichick knows is Belichick's done a lot of due diligence on players and to what he needs from them and how they fit into a system. And he can tell if a player fits into a system before they can tell. And so he's so good at knowing people and he assesses them. He uses a couple different assessments. So why aren't we doing that in business? Why don't we know how to put all of our players in the right seats to maximize their contribution? And I see teams doing that very little. I don't see them doing that very well at all. And we don't have clearly defined roles and responsibilities for our team because we know there's a bunch of roles and responsibilities that go into an organization. And if they're all doing their job, which is Belichick's go-to, like do your job. I go into organizations, Michael, and people go, well, I don't know what my job is. And I'm like, well, there was a job description when you applied, and here's all these responsibilities. Are you meeting and exceeding all of those? And like, yeah, I don't know. I've never seen that document since I started here 4 years ago. well, look, we don't have like accountability is now a four-letter word, right? So like we don't have that. Well, in sports, there's tons of accountability. Joe Madden was probably one of the best guys I'd ever seen at developing young talent. Probably because he had a bunch of intangibles. He had great structure, he had great organization, fabulous communication skills, and a come alongside coach's mentality that was firm when he needed it, but he rarely needed it. He was so strong in communication. People knew what to expect, and such a guy who was working hard and of integrity that no one wanted to disappoint him, right? And when you see these
Hmm.
coaches who model that behavior, even if they're hard on them and this that we were just Buck Nystrom passed away. He was a famous fourth quarter guy. He wrote the book on fourth quarter. So you see a college game, you see everybody holding up fourth quarter. That's Buck Nystrom's program, right? And so Saban's adopted that because he coached with Buck and. Buck was hard, man. I mean, this is a hard offensive line, man, working with hard young men, right? These kids were from the farms, they were from the trenches, and they're going to be in the trenches. And man, I'm telling you, when you see people like Tony Managers talk about him and tear up, like, man, this guy used to smack kids like upside the head. Like nowadays is unheard of, right? These guys are like, he was the best man that ever. I just wanted to be more like him and be a man, you know. Um, and so it was.
So
You just
let's
see the
compare and
influence.
contrast. You
It's
talk
the
about
influence of
Saban.
those people.
Yeah, Saban and who was the other one you said was Belichick, very process oriented. Was there a year in the 12 years that you worked for a coach? And we don't want to mention anybody's name, but that you feel like struggled, like you're seeing
Oh
this guy,
yeah,
you're seeing
yeah,
this guy coach is like he is
yeah,
not going to make it. What
yeah.
was the difference? What were if you were to drill down on the specific things that he wasn't willing to do, what were those things that
Yeah,
contributed to mediocrity or failure?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was I saw it up close and personal a couple times, and it was frustrating. And one is inconsistency, right? The inconsistency of, hey, do what I say, not what I do, or hey, we're really hot on this in June, and then 180 it because in July we're going to do this. And like we've been all working towards this thing, so there wasn't a very good process and structure there. Um, Poor communication skills and ego in the way. There's just some real contributors to poor leadership, right? And we see it in emotional intelligence and the lack of that. It's a huge factor for leaders. And it can be just damaging. And no matter how productive, right? Like I look at some people. Well, I'll use the example of our former president, right? Man, that's what everybody loves to talk about is President Trump, right? Like, so he was a highly productive individual. Like he got a lot done. He surrounds himself with these teams. He accomplishes a lot. He's built huge buildings. He's built massive projects. But at the same time, to me, from the outside looking in, there's challenges with emotional intelligence, with some of the communication that gets gapped out. And all of a sudden, no one cares about how productive you are. No one cares about what you've done. And so it's really kind of comes back to that. To me, you got to have a bunch of the things that got to go right. And great leaders have both structure, but they also just genuinely and authentically care. And when you see that, that's huge. I mean, I just don't think you can do without those two things.
Yeah, when the work that I've done, just a quick aside here. So I was a consultant. I started my business when I was 40, and maybe a year or two in, one of my clients asked me to breathe life into their mentorship, their player coach program.
Yeah.
So it's kind of I'm kind of a blank slate at that time. I was a sports fan, but it's not like I said, oh, I'm gonna be a executive coach. I'm gonna start training people on how to coach their people. I don't know if in your part of the country, but Half Price Bookstore, right,
Yeah.
is close to where I live, and why pay full price? You can go to half price. So I'm there. I bought a couple books on business coaching, thinking, well, that might be a good direction to go. And I was reading through them, and they were so boring, so
Mm.
dry, and so like a textbook. And I had this thought. It's like if I'm bored, my people in the class, people in the workshop, they're going to be bored too. So just as on a whim, I turned down, and I had an epiphany that's kind of affected my life quite a bit because my main program is how to develop a coaching mindset. That's why I love conversations with people who
Yeah.
understand coaching, been successful coaching. And what I realized is here's these and hundreds of books, all written by coaches, amateur coaches, college coaches, professional coaches of sports about leadership. So I asked myself the question, what do these people know about leadership from a clean perspective that would help other people learn how to coach? And so
Mhm.
we're talking about accountability. So the three things that, at least back then, clarity, right? Coaches like
Yeah.
Saban,
Big itty.
crystal clear on their expectations. You mentioned the guy didn't
Right.
know his job, didn't know what his job was. Well, on a, on a successful sports team, everybody knows their job and is held accountable. And so clarity, accountability, right? This idea of I'm not going to apologize. So Trent, this is something that it befuddles me. I do a lot of work in healthcare, and we our attendees. And what I've learned in my world, which is not, I'm not an international guy, I'm more of a regional player, that the vast majority of people in leadership roles are conflict avoidant. Just naturally, they get into
Yeah.
coaching conversation, trying to somebody be a better performer. They're making suggestions. They're being indirect, and I try to make coach ever apologizes for coaching. Right? They don't pull the player off to the side and say, "Son, you didn't run that play right. It's your feelings. I don't want to make you cry by telling you what you need to do when I put you back in there." But that's how
Yeah.
so many business people approach these critical, important coaching conversations. And so, have you ever met a coach that apologized for instructing or holding a player accountable for their performance of their position?
No, no, I mean,
It
we
doesn't
want
happen.
it, right?
And
We
yet in
want
business
it.
world, it
Yeah,
happens
we
every day.
want that. Oh yeah. Well, let's break that
Yeah.
down, right? Let's break that down and why that happens. So we are only judged on the role we're in. So if I'm the senior VP and you're the CEO and you've been the CEO for 8 years, and I push the envelope, man. I want to know, Michael, how we can make it better. And I'm stirring up conflict because I'm sitting there going to our team meetings with our 8 swim lanes, marketing, sales, customer service, name it, fulfillment, all those things, right? And we continue to languish in one department, right? And I'm like, hey, everyone else is doing their job. Everyone else is doing their role. And I've got, Brian over here and, fulfillment who's just jacking up the program. Now it's affecting sales. To me, it's like, it's the pool, right? We have the pool and we have 8 lanes and one lane's not being taken care of. So it's turning green with algae and we're all thinking, oh, it's not going to affect our lane. Like, of course it's going to, the pool's going to go green. It's just really green over there. And the lanes next to it, things that touch it all the time, are starting to get green, right? And I'm on the other side of the pool going, how long until you get to me? Like, I know it's coming. Like, we need to fix this. And so I create conflict because I'm like, we need productive conflict. Now, so Lencioni is so good about this as he talks about the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, right? Trust is the foundation. Because if we have trust, then the conflict is just a search for the truth. But now, if we don't have trust amongst the team and I stir up the conflict, when it becomes my job and the next role is going to come in there like, oh, well, Trent pisses people off a lot. Like he asks hard questions and, he holds people accountable to a level that's uncomfortable. I'll tell you right now, it's uncomforting. And you're like, we can't put someone like that at the top. Wait, what? Like, so they get passed over. So the people who don't rock the boat, who, hey, let's harmonize. Hey, let's sing around the fire. We'll do a little kumbaya. Like, come on, man. Like, that is not how teams are created. We don't get better in comfort zone ever. I lose you, Michael. Yep, I thought I lost you. I'm sorry. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one is I think it's hard, right? I mean, this isn't easy. Coaching isn't easy. You're developing talent, and I think that one of the things that's really hard for people like me to go back into that seat is I was so motivated to get good feedback, right? I was so motivated to get information from the top people. I worked hard and sought out the best to give me that information. And so I was ready to take it, right? Coachability, one of those big itties again that we need, is critical, and we need adaptability. And so when we talk about that, leaders have to have that. But there is this side that I had to recognize, like, hey, everybody's not like me. They don't want, constructive criticism, right? They don't want, and we're being challenged with that, I think, today. If you're a leader and you get into the young, mid 20s, early 30s, they'll check the box like, yes, I want feedback. But there's a gap because I think what they really want is praise and adulation. They don't really want the feedback like, oh, if it's not good, like I don't want that. Like I just want to be told like, hey, I'm awesome. Like, oh man, hey Trent, way to get to work on time. Like, are we praising that? Like everyone did that, right? So when you look at that, I think that Madden was one of the best at balancing these things, and Nick actually became very good at it because, and his success obviously is a body of work there, but I think he had to work very diligently on the one-on-one communication. He speaks to his team, and then he's very good one-on-one, and his process is ideal. He's a come alongside kind of coaching mentality for sure, and he has a genuine desire for people to be successful all around him, and it just oozes out of him. You just feel it. But and I think when he started, I don't think he loves being in a group of three or four people. He's not going out to happy hour with the guys. Like he's focused, and that's not his mo. And one, I think he's gotten comfortable that he's okay that he's not that guy. And two, he's worked diligently to be a better one-on-one and internal communicator and external communicator too, which is not his superpower, but he's gotten good enough at those things, and I think very good internally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm, yeah, yeah. Well, and that's what Saban does all the time. And I've got a great Nick story about when I coached with him at Michigan State. By the way, just letting you know on the chat, they're saying they don't hear your side of the audio. They only hear my side. So, yeah, that's what in the chat something said. So the question is about Nick Saban and his style, right? And so the story of Nick in his press conference was very evident of who he is behind the camera, and no one sees it, right? Like, because you're not there intimate to the team every day and what he's creating this legacy. And I think that's really important. But my story with Nick was one of the same. Nick's a 1 minute manager. Like, you go in with Nick, you have a 5 minute, 7 minute meeting, and you detail out the week, you detail of your area that you're responsible for, what's happening with the athletes. You always have a notebook with you when you're with Nick. He needs something, you write it down and follow up, right? That's very important. Follow up's big. Heaven forbid you go into a meeting and you didn't give Nick the information and the data, right? That happens once. The second time you're looking for a new coaching contract, right? And so when I decided to head to the Indians, right, with Cleveland, I was leaving Michigan State. Really hard decision for me and my wife. We just married, and very challenging. So the night before, I scheduled my meeting with Nick to tell him, right? He knew I was interviewing and blah blah, but I think I was scheduled Friday at 4:50. So, I know how long this meeting is going to be, right? And we're gonna meet up, and like I'm gonna give him the lowdown. And I got my notebook and I walk into his office. And the night before, I'm practicing my 5-minute spiel. Thank you for everything you've done. You've been a great mentor for me. I've been just sponging all this information. I'm going to take it into the rest of my life as a coach and my career and all those things that he did. And so he first of all sits, he's got this big desk, right? You got recruits all over the place. He's got all his busy stuff. And he's also got the old Rolodex, right? With the business cards in your Rolodex, right? And so first of all, I launch, there's 2 chairs and he's standing up at the desk and I launch into my speech. He's like, whoa, hold on, Trent. And he comes around the desk, right? And sits next to me, 45 degrees, sits next to me. And I'm like, oh, all right, coach. So, hey, so I launch back into my speech. He listens, intently for 4 or 5 minutes. I get done and he's like, all right, well, what I didn't notice was there's a stack of cards next to his Rolodex. And he goes, all right, Trent, well, listen, grab your notebook. Reaches forward, pulls his card. He goes, all right, you're going to want to know this person. They own 17 restaurants in the greater Cleveland area. I coach with the Browns, and here's my realtor. She's going to help you divide. This is probably where I would look for you. And if you were to, so Nick sits with me till after 5:30 on a Friday. I mean, I'm not incoming, Michael. I'm outgoing. Like, hey, he needs someone to replace me. He needs new staff, but yet he sees as a young guy. He's like, hey, and that was the first thing he said to me after my speech. He said, Trent, if you're good, you're going to be in demand and you're going to move. It's not easy on your family. It's challenging. There's a lot of challenges in this industry. And, I want to help you. And then, boom, he launched. And that's the guy that Nick Saban is, that probably nobody else knows about, right? Because you just don't see it in the cameras and everyone's so upset that, this is, I love, like you said, you touched on it too. Nick Saban, the guy who throws his headset down when they're up 37-3 with 5 minutes to go in a game, right? Because he's back to accountability. Like, hey, Trent, your group out there just jacked up a special teams. They almost ran a kickback. You have 2 players that are out of position from the time they set up. They were out of position, either too wide, too close, whatever. We all saw it. You're not, these kids, this is their chance now to shine, even if they're second teamers, which, by the way, in the Big Ten and the SEC, like, second teamers are first teamers in a week. Third string is first team in 2 weeks. Like, you have to have everybody ready because this is a violent, dangerous game, and players are injured and need to rehabilitate and come back. And so they're going to be forced in. So you got this kid who hasn't played 5 reps who will be starting against Auburn in 3 weeks. And Nick knows it, right? So as a coach, you have to have every player ready and conditioned for what's ahead on the job. So that's what he's doing. He's about the process is breaking down. This is your chance to get your reps, and you don't come ready. And he cannot tolerate that. And he doesn't. So I love that about him, for sure. Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of Leadershipity, and that's all the idiots of leadership. So, transitioning from coaching to this and that. So once I left professional baseball, I owned a trucking company and I sold that. And then I started in the maritime business and was helping a mentor of mine in the mentoring space. I was an executive at a company, learning a lot about leadership, jacked up a bunch of lessons that I had learned from sports and failed in business because I didn't transfer those things over. Then I started my own. I had good relations in that business, started my own company in the maritime space. and really enjoyed that, and realized also that I'm not the greatest employee because I want to change things. I want things to be better. I want to lead and create value. And organizations that don't want to do that fast, or they don't want to upset the apple cart, or they're holding this thing on like annuity, like, hey, let's not change anything and maybe it'll just keep kicking off our percentages. That's just not a very good environment for me, because it feels like very low performance. It feels very slow and non-demanding, and very few people reach their potential in my history of being around that environment. So I got back into coaching because I really just felt drawn to it from a purpose, which was, this is what I've been trained up. I think God gave me some strengths to do this. And we really focused on the idioms of leadership, right? So, leadership is all about accountability, integrity, spirituality, quality. I mean, all these idioms that we want, ultimately culminating in our pyramid of leadership, which we talk about all the time, based on I kind of structured that a little bit like wooden with some cornerstones there. And I just think that that culminates in productivity, right? Great teams have great productivity. And so we focus on that with teams, and as we look at that, and when people communicate well, you sit right in, and you hit right in the middle of that pyramid is clarity. And we just don't have a lot of that today. And when you say it about, do your job, it's funny because I can't tell you how many organizations I go into, Michael, and A, people don't know what their job is, and B, a lot of times if they do know what their job is, they're not doing it, right? They're doing somebody else's job. And you saw Angel kind of wade in there, that people are being hired and then they don't do what they're hired for. They want to do something else inside the organization. That doesn't serve the team well. But then we got to come back to that big itty of accountability. And when those leaders have to do that, if you don't like discomfort, I don't know if you should be in leadership, because you're going to have uncomfortable conversations all the time. I mean, you've got to be steadfast in what you're going for, the direction we're going, communicate with clarity, be able to deliver a message with clarity, and you've got to have some challenging and hard conversations, right? I love the book Fierce Conversations, right? We are going to have things that are challenging. And if and I felt like, Michael, if you were my superior and the authority for me, and you see something in me to get me better, and you didn't tell me, and 3 months later I'm dismissed from this opportunity, and on the way out you go, yeah, I really saw this, a quarter or two back, and really saw that you were mucking it up. I just didn't want to have any uncomfortable conversation. Like, wait, what? Like, I mean, you were instantly in contempt because I'm holding you there. Because why wouldn't you tell me as a friend? If you saw that I'm dropping my elbow and now I've struck out and popped up, 18 times in a row, and I'm over 25 before I get to sent to AAA, I'd like you, as my buddy friend, that you see this, to gently let me know this is happening and this is what I see. I mean, and I don't think you need to be harsh. I don't think you need to be hardcore, but it's probably an uncomfortable conversation with someone where things aren't going very well for them. But we have to have those. And for folks who are unwilling to lean into the discomfort, please do not go into leadership. Yes. Ever. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I love wooden, right? And so a couple things that really just stack up for that is the fact that he never looked at video of any other team for that exact reason. Like, hey, if we do our job and we've developed the best that we can be, why would we be concerned about what they're doing? They need to worry about what we're doing. Right? And so, and then the other thing is like people that other coaches who knew so much about him would come for miles, not to come watch a UCLA game, to come watch a UCLA practice because how he could maximize the individual development and training inside of 2 hours because that was his commitment to those kids. And not a single kid that comes out of that organization goes, oh man, I thought I was learning about basketball, but they all go, man, what John Wooden taught me was about life. Like, whether you became, and he's got all sorts of Hollywood actors and all sorts of people that weren't successful at the NBA at basketball, but are now CEOs and, they're authorities in all sorts of different parts of lives and homes. And what he taught them, they're passing that legacy on to others. And wow, I mean, talk about a guy who I feel like really got it right. He's pretty dialed in. Yeah, so you can find me at leadershipity.com or Trent M. Clark on all the social or leadershipity on all the socials. So for sure you can find that there. We are a firm that helps people become better, right? We help you build teams of coachable champions. And so for organizations that are struggling with that, that's what we do. We offer individual coaching. Our tend of firm is a consulting firm, and so we've been in both business and sport. So we spend a lot of organizations around that. We're somewhat uh, um, we don't so much concern ourselves with the industry, right? Teams are teams. And so we focus in on that. We tend to focus in on helping people get good and do things better very quickly and coming together as a unit, as a team to do that. So we have a pretty aggressive consulting program by quarter where teams come together and we have a playbook behind that called data driven ops, DD ops for operations. And we utilize all those tools we've learned about accountability for athletes, put that into the business environment, driving at a single metric that they want to measure and improve on very quickly. And we start there and then work quarter by quarter. It's been very successful. And fortunately, I got a bunch of great team members around me who are much smarter and quicker and better than I am. So that's really good. Thank you for having me, Michael.